Imagine standing in a hearing room, the air thick with tension, and a single question slices through all the political noise. Can the Secretary of Defense defy the Supreme Court? That's not a softball, it's not a soundbite, it's a challenge that cuts to the core of our democracy. And when Representative Sarah Elfreth of Maryland asked it, you could almost feel the oxygen get sucked out of the room. No grandstanding, no hedging, just a sharp demand for clarity. And the answer she forced onto the record revealed far more than most people realized. Because in that moment, the stakes weren't about party lines or talking points.
Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I want to echo first my colleagues and their concerns surrounding a number of issues, including the deployment of Marines to Los Angeles, the importance of supporting our ally in Ukraine, the alarming security breach that was Signalgate, and the unjust termination of members of our military from diverse backgrounds who simply want to serve our nation. But before I get to my questions, Mr. Secretary, I want to just follow up on my colleague from New Hampshire. Setting aside district courts, do you believe you have the authority to defy a Supreme Court ruling, yes or no?
We're not here to defy a Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, I'll take that as a win. I'm going to move on to cybercom in my state. Mr. Secretary, earlier this year, General Hawk was relieved of his command of cybercom and NSA following a tweet that accused him of being disloyal to the president. And the oath that you took, the oath that I took, does not demand loyalty to any president, but to this Constitution. I too brought my copy from college with me. And yet, as of this date, General Hawk, his successor has not yet been named, and you've stated many times that lethality of the military is critical, so it's difficult to understand how this administration would allow any billet to remain unfilled, especially those who lead our combatant commands. I join my colleague, Congressman Bacon, in my grave concern that both the firing and the delay in hiring of a leader of cybercom only gives assurance and comfort to our adversaries. So I'm sure you would agree that any combatant command cannot be at its most lethal if a commander remains absent. When will the president announce the new commander of cybercom?
I would note there's a very highly capable deputy there, so it's
Absolutely,
not
I
adrift at all. We recognize that, and we are in the process of ensuring that slot is filled.
Any in the next month, 2 months, 3 months?
It will not be that long.
Okay, I appreciate that. General Kane, during your confirmation process, you stated that the dual hat arrangement provides the ability to look across both organizations and has empowered both U.S. Cybercom and the NSA to fulfill their missions better than each could do alone. Can you confirm for this committee that you hold that view to this day, and in one sentence or less speak to the importance of that dual hat arrangement?
Yeah, that reflects the current policy of the administration. The Secretary, of course, as does the President, reserves the right to rethink that. Both organizations are critical, and whether they're a single or dual hat relationship, if directed, we'll take a look at the risk associated with each one of them and come back to our civilian leaders with those risks and let them make a decision on it.
But you are in the room, are you not, advising the President as what is best for our national security?
I am in the room, yeah.
And can you commit to,
yeah.
I agree, can you commit to continuing your advocacy for that dual hat relationship?
After some analysis, at the time I wasn't even in the military, I was still coming back in.
Okay.
So if directed to take a look at it, we'll carefully, ma'am, measure the goods and others of each of those. But you have my commitment that I'll continue as I have, giving my candid, forthright military advice on the eaches and others of all those to Secretary of the NSC and the President.
Thank you, sir. I want to move on to sexual assault in the military, and it remains a stain on this DoD and this entire nation. It erodes cohesion. It brings a lifetime of pain and recovery for victims, including my constituents. It's important to members of this committee that funding for SAPR in particular increases, and that any flatline of that funding would be viewed as a decrease. In preparation for and during your confirmation, Mr. Secretary, you made commitments that you would support a robust sexual assault program and response program that, quote, seeks to drive sexual assaults in the military down to zero. I commend you for that commitment. I agree with it. And yet, has been brought up many times, we have no budget by which to measure your commitment and your promises. So can you commit to today that when we do at last receive your final FY26 budget, we will see an increase to SAPR funding and a plan from you as to how to drive sexual assaults down to zero?
As I said in my confirmation, I applaud Congress for the efforts that have been ongoing to address that issue, which we do need to drive to zero. That funding has not been reduced. We've looked at a lot of places for efficiencies. That has not been one, and I think you've seen the same news I have that thankfully sexual assaults are coming down, and we continue to want to do that.
But we have to remain ever vigilant, which is why I hope it's not level funded. I hope we can continue to drive that down, so I look forward to that final budget whenever we do receive it. Lastly, and I'll take this for the record, moving on to a similar topic, which is rape kits for DoD civilians overseas. In April, DHA issued a memo denying DoD non-beneficiary civilians who are victims of sexual assault and rape access to sexual assault evidence collection kits. If I could get for the record your explanation for this decision. These civilians support the DoD. It's incredibly important that we find and bring justice to those victims, and I look forward to working with you on it. And I'll yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady's time's expired, Chair.
They were about something far deeper, whether those entrusted with the power of our military still understand their oath, and if they don't, what does that mean for the rest of us? Now, most hearings follow a script. Politicians toss soft questions, officials deflect with jargon, and everyone goes home pretending progress was made. But not this time. Elfreth walked in with her Constitution in hand, literally holding it up as a reminder of the oath she swore and the oath the Secretary had sworn. She stripped away all the wiggle room, pinning him down with a yes or no ultimatum, and when he finally muttered, "We're not here to defy the Supreme Court," it might have sounded obvious, but the hesitation told a different story. Because lately we've seen something new and unsettling, powerful people quietly toying with the idea of ignoring rulings they don't like. The fact that Elfreth even had to ask showed how fragile those guardrails really are. But here's the thing, she wasn't just asking a theoretical question, she was sending a message. A reminder that loyalty isn't owed to a person in power but to the law itself, to the Constitution, to something bigger than political convenience. And once she had that on the record, she pivoted with surgical precision to an even more alarming issue, the leadership crisis at U.S. Cyber Command. Think about this for a moment. At the exact time America faces constant cyber attacks from adversaries, the post in charge of defending our digital front lines was left without a confirmed commander. Why? Because the last leader, General Hawk, was ousted after whispers of disloyalty. Disloyalty not to the country, not to the Constitution, but to the man in the Oval Office. A single tweet questioning his loyalty was enough to end his command. And in the aftermath, the position sat vacant, one of the most sensitive, most vital commands in our entire defense structure left leaderless. Elfreth wasn't about to let that slide. She pressed the Secretary directly, pointing out what should be obvious: leaving Cyber Command adrift is like leaving the front door unlocked while enemies are already testing the locks. Every day that post sits empty sends a signal of instability, one our adversaries are more than happy to exploit. She didn't mince words. How can you talk about lethality and readiness when the very people meant to lead are missing? The Secretary tried to reassure her, insisting that a capable deputy was in place and that the vacancy would be filled soon. But soon isn't a plan, and Elfreth knew it. She pressed harder, refusing to accept vague promises. Because the truth is, in national security, delays aren't neutral, they're dangerous. And everyone watching could see it. And yet she wasn't done. With the same relentless focus, she shifted gears again, turning from the external threats at our borders to the internal threats within the ranks of our military. The issue? Sexual assault. Now this isn't a comfortable topic, it's not easy soundbite material, but Elfreth forced it onto the table because ignoring it has already destroyed too many lives. She called it what it is, a stain on the Department of Defense and on the country itself. For years victims have come forward, service members who faced not only the trauma of assault but also retaliation and silence when they sought justice. The Pentagon often points to programs, promises, and pilot projects, but Elfreth cut right to the chase. Budgets speak louder than press releases. She demanded to know whether funding for SAPR, the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program, would actually increase in the coming year. Because here's the hard truth, if funding stays flat, it's effectively a cut. Inflation eats away, needs grow, and victims are left with less support than before. The Secretary's answer? He said the numbers were improving, that reported assaults were finally trending downward, and that funding hadn't been reduced. But Elfreth wasn't buying it, because statistics are easy to spin. Behind every number is a person, a story, and a lifetime of consequences. And she made it clear, half measures aren't enough. Promises aren't progress, only action measurable, budgeted action counts. But just when you thought her questioning had peaked, she dropped something most people had never even heard about: the denial of rape kits for Department of Defense civilian employees serving overseas. Let that sink in. These are civilians who work side by side with our military abroad, often in dangerous conditions, and yet a quiet policy decision recently stripped them of access to sexual assault evidence collection kits, the very first step toward justice after an attack. Elfreth exposed this decision in front of the cameras, calling it unacceptable. Because what message does it send to deny those tools? That their suffering doesn't matter, that their service doesn't count. She demanded answers, demanding to know why those serving overseas in support of the mission would be denied something so basic, so essential, so humane. And in that moment you could feel the weight of it. Because oversight isn't just about catching budget errors or debating strategy. It's about standing up for people who don't have the microphone. It's about demanding justice where bureaucracy would rather stay silent. What made Elfreth's line of questioning so powerful was the thread connecting it all. From the Supreme Court to Cyber Command to sexual assault prevention, it wasn't just about policy, it was about accountability. It was about whether the people entrusted with power still remember that their first duty is to the law and to those they serve, not to politics, not to convenience, not to personal survival. In less than an hour, she forced the Pentagon to answer on the record about the rule of law, national security readiness, and the human cost of neglect. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching of something we often forget: democracy doesn't defend itself. It requires people willing to ask the uncomfortable questions, to cut through the rehearsed talking points, and to hold power accountable, no matter how awkward or tense the silence becomes. The hearing ended like so many do, with the gavel falling and the room emptying. But the echoes of those questions lingered. Can military leaders ever place themselves above the Constitution? Why was one of our most critical commands left without a leader during a time of growing threats? Why do promises about protecting service members keep colliding with the harsh reality of underfunded programs? And how can we possibly justify denying justice tools to civilians serving our country overseas? These aren't abstract questions, they're real, urgent, and unavoidable. And if there was one clear takeaway, it's this: leadership is not about position, it's about conscience. And sometimes it takes a representative holding up a worn copy of the Constitution to remind us all of that fact. Because at the end of the day, no official, no department, and no administration is above the Constitution or the people it protects. The real danger isn't in asking tough questions, it's in letting them go unasked. And that's why moments like this matter. They cut through the noise, they pierce the spin, and they put accountability back where it belongs, in the hands of the people. If you believe those questions matter too, if you think accountability shouldn't be optional, then don't let this moment fade into the background. Share this story, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you never miss the conversations that those in power hope you're not paying attention to. Because the truth is, silence is what lets power drift away from the people. And the only way to stop that drift is to keep watching, keep questioning, and keep demanding answers.